My daughter returned home with tears in her eyes after she was invited to a Christmas meeting with her grandparents. There was anxiety and hidden resentment in her gaze. Without saying a word, she handed me a neatly wrapped gift, her fingers trembling with excitement or suppressed emotions. "Mom, look," she said in a barely audible voice, and her voice was trembling. "Why should I put up with this?" I silently picked up the package and, feeling inner anxiety, began to unwrap it. When the package was opened, there was something in my hands that immediately caused me rejection, a completely inappropriate thing for a child, which only confirmed my growing suspicion. Alarmed and unable to remain indifferent, I immediately decided to contact the police, realizing that this situation requires immediate intervention. Proceedings soon began, which revealed not only the essence of the incident, but also led to unexpected shocks in the family caused by the actions of those who presented this gift. The family drama unfolded with terrifying force. Those responsible faced serious consequences, including one of the relatives, who was 45 years old at the time, who was married to a much younger husband working for the same company. Remembering the past, I couldn't help but think about my life. At the age of 34, I started a new career, venturing this step after a derogatory comment from a previous employer who seemed to question not only my professional abilities, but also my age. However, in my current workplace, I was received with dignity. It was not so much my years or gender that were valued here, as my skills and experience. My husband provided especially great support during this period. He was not only my life partner, but also a boss I could always rely on. Our relationship developed rapidly, and soon we got married. Soon after the wedding, we had a daughter, a gentle, vulnerable soul, who adores books and always shows care and kindness to others. However, our relationship with my husband's sister was not easy from the very beginning. Despite her warm relations with the rest of the family, she always treated me with condemnation. The reason for this was my age. I am older than my husband, and for her it was an occasion for endless ridicule and malicious remarks. Her injections concerned not only my age, but also the changes that happened to me after pregnancy. Her goal, apparently, was to constantly make unflattering comparisons between our children and make sarcastic remarks about my age, allegedly negatively affecting my daughter. This was especially painful when, looking at my girl, she spoke sarcastically about the wrinkles that, in her opinion, had already begun to appear on my child's face. These words sounded especially insulting against the background of the fact that she herself proudly showed off her son's impeccably smooth skin, as if this was a direct evidence of her superiority in the role of a young mother who had managed to adapt better to the new stage of parenthood. I was amazed by her audacity. She often came to visit empty-handed, without taking even the most necessary things for her child. However, every time she left, she did not forget to take some diapers and formula, without even asking if we needed it ourselves. She seemed to take it for granted, as an integral part of her visit, as if these supplies were her right. Her behavior caused me deep perplexity. It seemed that the main purpose of her visits was to humiliate me with her contempt and unspoken sense of superiority, and then carry off the supplies as if it were her triumph. Fortunately, after my sister-in-law's husband got a new job, their family was forced to move to another state. This move brought a short-term peace to our lives. For several months, we were able to enjoy the silence and focus on raising our daughter. But this respite did not last long. When our girl went to elementary school, we suddenly discovered that her cousin was also enrolled in the same class. Despite all the tension that developed between adults, the children quickly found a common language. A warm and sincere friendship has developed between our daughter and her cousin. Our daughter, being older, always took care of her younger relative, and he, in turn, sincerely admired her. By the time they reached the 3rd grade, her cousin had become one of the most popular boys among his peers. The children were inseparable, studied in the same class and supported each other. A particularly striking moment was how my daughter received recognition for her literary work. Her thoughts on the summer project were so deep and penetrating that they were published in the local newspaper, which caused universal admiration among our family and friends. This achievement has become a topic of conversation, especially during our visits to relatives. At that time, many relatives were present at the family meeting, and perhaps this was due to pride in our girl and her successes. However, despite the joy caused by her daughter's success, my sister-in-law seemed to be clearly concerned that on this day the attention of the whole family was focused not on her child, but on our daughter. She complained about the injustice, claiming that, in her opinion, it was her son who should have earned recognition, since the famous book, according to her, was intended specifically for him. My sister-in-law unfairly accused me of writing an award-winning reflection for my daughter myself, probably based on the fact that I was once fond of writing novels as a student. Apparently, she got this information from my husband, although I never discussed my long-standing hobbies with his family. Perhaps it was this fact, now taken out of context, that served as the basis for her malicious speculation and gossip, which she began to spread in school circles. Moreover, she even went so far as to claim that I used my personal connections with the judges of the competition to unfairly help my daughter take the prize. Spreading these completely groundless rumors was especially painful for me, but they hurt my daughter the most. Her once ardent interest in reading and writing faded under the pressure of these unfair accusations. She, who previously could not part with the book, lost interest in her favorite activity, sinking into a quiet sadness. It was unbearable for me to watch this, and it was the last straw in the cup of my patience. Realizing that I needed to act before the situation worsened, I finally decided to tell my husband about everything. It was the first time that I revealed to him the depth of the ill will that his sister had shown me since the beginning of our marriage. I remembered how, without asking, she took away the clothes she had bought for our daughter, justifying herself by saying that babies, they say, do not distinguish clothes by gender. I also told him about her sarcastic comments about my appearance during pregnancy when she compared me to a sumo wrestler. My husband was outraged by his sister's behavior and agreed that it was time to bring his parents into the conversation. He insisted on talking about the situation in person, deciding to meet with his parents and discuss it in front of the whole family. We went to my sister-in-law's house without telling her about the visit. Her joy at the unexpected family visit quickly turned to shock when she realized that a serious conversation was waiting for her. My husband, with restraint but firmness, made it clear to her that her behavior was unacceptable. Her first reaction was to unleash all her anger on me. She accused me of betraying her by turning her brother against her, exposing myself as a victim, trying to absolve myself of all responsibility. At first, her calls seemed to be attempts at reconciliation, and I naively answered, hoping for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. But it soon became clear that all her phone conversations were just another opportunity to express her disappointment and annoyance. Eventually, tired of her negativity, I set her number so that all her calls were automatically redirected to voicemail, effectively closing the doors for further communication in front of her. A few weeks passed, and the calls stopped, which I explained to myself as her loss of interest in further conflicts. However, it soon became clear that this was not the case. In December of that year, my in-laws on my husband's side organized a children's Christmas party, hosting such an event for the first time. I was surprised by the coincidence. The invitation came just at the moment when we were almost moving away from past troubles. My daughter was delighted with the invitation. She was happy to recall her participation in last year's kindergarten celebrations and hoped for something similar at her elementary school, although, to her disappointment, she did not organize such events because of her strict policy towards religious holidays. This disappointment prompted us to create a homemade Christmas miracle on our own. We immersed ourselves in the atmosphere of the holiday, we decorated the house, cooked delicious treats, and the most long-awaited event was the exchange of gifts. The invitation to the family party turned out to be not so simple. The organizers offered a small budget of $11 for a gift to exchange, which prompted my daughter and I to go to the mall in search of the perfect gift. This little adventure became an exciting event for us. Between the sparkling showcases and a lot of festive decorations, we were looking for something that could bring joy and convey the spirit of Christmas. My daughter, having once chosen her favorite book with colorful illustrations, invested in this gift not only material value, but also a part of her soul, because the book brought her joy and warmth, and she sincerely wanted to share these emotions with someone else. With pride and the expectation that her gesture would be appreciated, she went to a children's Christmas party organized at the house of my mother-in-law, who was always kind to us. When she informed her grandmother of her intention to come by bus, she took care and offered to meet her at the bus stop so that the road would seem less frightening on this winter evening. I received a call from my mother-in-law confirming that my daughter had arrived safely, and this allowed me to relax a little, since I was home alone. My husband was at work at that moment, and I was doing remote tasks. However, the silence in the house was soon broken by the sudden sound of the door opening, and I, not expecting anyone, froze in surprise. The noise of the front door was so unexpected that at first I couldn't even realize what was happening. And when I saw who came in, my heart sank. My daughter was standing on the doorstep, tears streaming down her face, and in her hands she was holding a package with a gift that she was just going to give at a party. Her silence and downcast eyes indicated that something terrible had happened. When she handed me this package, I felt a chill in my chest. Inside, I found scraps of newspaper with her photo, where she reads her essay, the one that once brought her recognition and joy. However, now these newspapers have been mutilated, torn into small pieces. Along with this, there was a letter written in red ink, as if in blood, in which threats sounded. It said that we should not be arrogant, otherwise we would suffer the same fate as the mutilated stuffed animal, which was also in the package, doused with the same red ink. It all looked like an elaborate, far from harmless joke, which became an ominous reminder that someone clearly wanted to harm us. My daughter, in tears, told me in a trembling voice that this terrible gift was the work of my daughter-in-law. I was stunned. What was supposed to be a joyful children's holiday turned into a nightmare. The party, at which the adults agreed in advance to refrain from gifts, turned into a real mockery and humiliation for my child. What struck me even more was that my mother-in-law probably didn't know that her daughter would be at this event. She has always been on the side of justice and respect for others, and if she had known about her daughter's intentions, no doubt she would have warned us. Apparently, this was a deliberate act that was planned behind our backs, and it was only thanks to a lucky chance that my daughter was able to leave in time, avoiding further humiliation. When I saw the tears on my daughter's face and her frightened look, I realized that I could no longer stay away. We had to act to protect her. I reminded her that she could always turn to her grandmother for support, but unfortunately, before she could do that, my aunt intervened. My aunt, looking displeased, said that only children from missionary schools were welcome at the Christmas party. My daughter, puzzled by this strange explanation, asked me what it meant, and I hesitated, not knowing how best to answer. Our family has recently had heated discussions about mission schools, especially after my daughter-in-law's son started attending such a kindergarten. We have heard many stories from relatives who never suspected that such institutions could have an impact on children. Our choice was different. We chose a local kindergarten and a public elementary school for our daughter, believing that it was the best for her development. It seemed that my daughter-in-law used any difference between our families as an excuse to humiliate and belittle our daughter again. Seeing my daughter in front of me, overwhelmed by these threats, I couldn't take it anymore. Trying to remain calm, but feeling a wave of indignation inside, I decided to immediately contact the police. Fortunately, the policewoman, young but already experienced, quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Sympathizing with our fear and sense of helplessness, she recognized that family threats and manifestations of aggression are not only unacceptable, but also considered offenses requiring immediate intervention. Her confidence and professionalism gave me a sense of relief. Finally, someone took our anxiety seriously. She promised that she would visit my daughter-in-law in the near future with an official warning to stop further threats and clearly outline the legal consequences of her behavior. When my husband returned home in the evening, I could not contain the wave of indignation that swept over me after the events of the day. I described to him everything that had happened without omitting a single detail, and to my relief he condemned his sister's actions with sincere anger. He immediately contacted his parents to discuss what had happened, and as it turned out, they were completely unaware of the incident. They expressed surprise and indignation at the incident, claiming that the daughter-in-law could only get to the party through an unlocked back door while the mother-in-law was busy with other duties of organizing the holiday. As soon as the policeman, Officer Stern, warned my sister-in-law about the consequences of her frightening actions, our family finally began to realize the scale of the problem. This caused great concern among the relatives, which, in turn, led to the decision to organize a family meeting to discuss the situation and develop a plan for further action. The meeting was scheduled at my sister-in-law's house, and despite the fact that she and her husband arrived late, it was obvious from the very first minute that she was unhappy with the police intervention and did not repent at all. Her husband, on the other hand, looked confused, clearly not fully understanding the purpose of the meeting. This only increased the tension, since, apparently, he was not informed of all the circumstances until the last moment. When the truth about her actions finally surfaced, his face reflected genuine shock and disappointment. He was completely unaware of how far his wife had gone in her attempts to harm our family. There was sincerity in his reaction, and he soon apologized to us, which was in stark contrast to her cold and defiant attitude. My sister-in-law, continuing to persist, said that since the police had not arrested her, it allegedly proved her innocence. Her words shocked everyone. The level of denial and self-deception was so deep that we simply could not find the words. She stood in front of us with an impenetrable expression on her face, as if all this was just an annoying misunderstanding, and not the result of her malicious actions. But an unexpected twist came when her husband suddenly announced his decision to file for divorce. This outspoken step stunned everyone present, since up to that moment their marriage seemed quite prosperous and stable. We had never noticed any obvious signs of a crisis, but now, in the midst of a family conflict, it became obvious that his decision was not impulsive. His explanations revealed a long history of patience and hidden frustration. According to him, their family life has long turned into a struggle with her neglect of household duties, her obsession with appearance and vanity, which pushed her to unnecessary spending and attempts to maintain a high social status. Not only did this not bring happiness to their home, but it also created tension and growing alienation. He also admitted that one of the reasons for her disappointment was her ambitions for their son, which were far from always justified. She sought to enroll him in the most prestigious kindergartens and schools, despite the fact that his preferences and abilities were often ignored. They eventually settled on a public elementary school, a decision supported by their son and his father, but which only irritated and displeased her. However, the seriousness of her actions, especially the ominous message sent to the child, went far beyond what could be considered an ordinary joke. This is not just an unpleasant situation, but something deeper. An act that could instill fear even in an adult was absolutely unjustified and emphasized the irretrievable loss of trust in our family. When I met her face to face, I tried to convey to her the full depth of this gap, explaining that her actions not only destroyed family ties, but also questioned her ability to show basic care and compassion. Being a parent doesn't automatically mean having parental instincts, I told her, trying not to raise my voice, even though everything was boiling inside. I wanted her to understand that her behavior was unacceptable, especially from a man who was a mother himself. My husband, who had been silent all this time, watching the scene with a heavy expression on his face, finally spoke. He looked at his sister with cold seriousness and said, "Tears won't help here. You're not a child, and you shouldn't expect your tears to absolve you of responsibility for what you've done." But despite all our attempts to reach her, she continued to cry, denying any guilt. Her voice trembled as she wondered why everyone was turning against her. And then, in an apparent attempt to divert the conversation, she suggested that this whole tense situation arose not because of her actions, but because of my marriage to her brother. Her words burned. She said that the problem was that I was older than her brother, and that, in her opinion, caused such condemnation from the family. She clearly did not understand that the root of the problem lay in her actions, and not in our age or any other circumstances. Her inability to acknowledge the seriousness of her actions has left us in deep perplexity. The atmosphere in the room was thickening. Unresolved tension literally hung in the air. My husband was particularly stunned by her categorical unwillingness to understand the essence of what was happening, and her accusations against us only added fuel to the fire. Eventually, the conversation ended abruptly, and her husband had no choice but to escort her home. He looked depressed, realizing that this was just another stage in their increasingly destructive relationship. The divorce talks that arose earlier have now become an inevitable reality. When their divorce proceedings actually began, it was overshadowed by her strong resistance to admit her guilt. She refused to accept responsibility, instead trying to justify her actions by saying that they were supposedly an innocent joke that did not deserve such serious treatment. However, everything changed when their son, without any malicious intentions, told his classmates about what he had seen at that ill-fated Christmas party. He told how he witnessed a terrible exchange of gifts and especially described a mutilated toy stained with a red liquid resembling blood. This story quickly spread among the school community, causing a real stir and concern among teachers and parents. My husband received several calls from concerned parents, who were now aware of the details of what had happened. They were amazed and outraged by this behavior, and their anxiety only increased when they learned that this was not just an accidental incident, but part of a deliberately prepared act that was now being discussed everywhere, from school corridors to parent meetings. It was especially hard for my daughter to go back to school after this story got out. She felt isolated and vulnerable, and it seemed to her that everyone was discussing what had happened. Her spirit was overwhelmed by the incident and the endless gossip that followed, which somehow connected her with her cousin's story. School friends, unaware of the heavy burden she was carrying, discussed the events of the Christmas party, fueling speculation. Each new version of the retold story increasingly confused and distorted reality, emphasizing the devastating impact of one thoughtless act on the lives of all participants. I hoped that this storm would subside soon, that time would heal the wounds, and my daughter would be able to return to school when she was ready. For her cousin, the intention to share what happened was not an attempt to amuse or attract attention. It was a desperate plea for help, a cry from the soul, born out of fear for his own mother's actions. His frankness, shown in communication with classmates, only accelerated the inevitable. Her husband, realizing the seriousness of what was happening, was forced to speed up the divorce process. He accepted her terms of divorce, not out of desire, but out of the need to end their separation as soon as possible, to finally close the page of their life together, which was poisoned by her actions. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law's behavior became public knowledge. Her threatening behavior towards children was now widely discussed not only at school, but also among the neighbors. The community that had previously treated her with respect was now turning away from her. She faced open hostility. What started as covert glances and whispers behind her back gradually turned into outright condemnation. Feeling cornered, an outcast in her own neighborhood, she saw divorce as an escape from this curse. She imagined that returning to her parents' house would bring her comfort and protection. However, the reality turned out to be much more severe. Her husband, despite the complexity of their relationship, remained steadfast in his decision to keep his son. He insisted that custody of the boy be fully assigned to him, and surprisingly, she agreed to this without much objection. Coldly and indifferently, she stated that her son no longer mattered to her, as she planned to remarry, claiming that children only interfered with her personal plans. These words sounded like an echo of cruelty, but the most painful was the reaction of her own son, who, upon hearing this, refused her. With an uncharacteristic maturity for his age, he declared that he no longer needed her care and warned her against trying to approach his cousin, my daughter. Her situation was rapidly deteriorating. When she tried to return to her parents' house, she was met with refusal, the doors of her family home, once open, were now closed. She was left alone, face to face with the consequences of her actions, without support and without understanding how to fix everything she had done. In desperation, she embarked on a dangerous path, plunging deeper into financial debt, resorting to questionable sources to cover her growing needs. In the end, she disappeared from our lives as suddenly as she brought chaos to them. My husband, his parents, and I accepted this disappearance as a final decision. No one tried to put her on the wanted list, and no official inquiries were made to the police. Her absence from our lives brought an unexpected sense of relief. After a while, my daughter regained her self-confidence and returned to school, where her cousin, her support in difficult times, continued to stand by her side. His presence gave my daughter that sense of security she had been missing. Gradually, this ordeal, which could have divided our families forever, on the contrary, brought us closer together. We joined together in taking care of our children, and the presence of my sister-in-law's ex-husband, who became almost a family for us, became especially important. My in-laws accepted both my daughter and her cousin as their own grandchildren, showing sincere care and attention. They tried to make up for the lack of support and love that became apparent in the absence of the children's mother. With her disappearance, our family finally found the long-awaited peace. With the tension that had been hanging over us for many years, the feeling of insecurity also disappeared, and in its place appeared a strong, trusting relationship, which was so lacking earlier.